all and welcome all. I'm your host, Boo, and today we have a jam-packed show for you with a great special guest. Tune in.
Yo, hello everybody and welcome everybody. Wow, do we have a jam-packed show for you today with a special guest. I got a little intro there before anybody comes off of mic, so let's get to it. This is episode 47. We have been keeping it consistent out here in Web3, whether it's raining, shining, hailstorming, or the beautiful palm trees are swinging, baby. This is episode 47 with me, your host, Boo, my incredible co-host, JPEG J, and we're going to keep it smashing on with our insanely great guest today. So with that, we are live on X right now. You can listen to us live. You can also go on YouTube live and check us out. You can see our beautiful faces. You can check me out with my filter, my beautiful co-host in their VRM, and David joined us live with him as his real self, which is incredible that we can all be here today. Thank you for being here. Share out the room, drop a question, drop a comment, because we'll get to it all. We cover everything here. Yo, if you got YouTube Premium, you can mute the fucking YouTube video. You can watch it and literally listen to the X Spaces. That's how crazy we got the tech going on here today. So with that, let me get into the red tape. Yo, this is an hour-long show. Sometimes we go a little over here. It's okay with that. With the first 30 minutes dedicated to our guests, because you know what? We don't do elevator pitches here. They can sit back, relax, and answer a question however long they please, and we have a lot to get into with it. And the last 30 minutes, we'll bring up anybody who wants to ask Q&A, open mic, throw flowers, be respectful with that. And with that, JPEG J, how are you doing today? I know you got some results on our poll last week and much more.
Hello. Yes, we do. We've been doing this weekly poll, and last week our question was, do we think email marketing will be still as relevant as Web3 becomes more and more mainstream? This was a question that you were discussing last week with our guest, and the results, it's 50-50. Half the people think that email is forever, and half people think that it should be all wallets only.
I absolutely love that. JPEG J, also, I want you to do yourself a favor here and plug what you just finished today. JPEG J is a real-time artist, and she just finished a custom piece for an art show coming up this weekend. Please plug it away.
Yes, this weekend there is a fantastic toy custom show at Clutter Magazine Gallery, and a lot of people flying out for it. We have customized a glow in the dark Kuma figure, and in the following week, we're actually going to be pitting each of the Kumas against each other on Instagram to see who's the strongest bear.
Hey, I think we're going to be talking about bears on the show today. Thank you, JPEG J. Wow, I could not do it without her, y'all. You can tell that I stay on subject here because she's like my octopus in the background. Everybody needs one. Please reach out to people if you're trying to get one, expand out your show. With that, I want to give an incredible welcome to David Horvath, known as the IP expert in Web3 spaces. Yeah, I'll say it. Co-creator of Ugly Doll. I just watched the movies last night. The movie was incredible. Star-studded cast out there. I'll go off memory right now. Kelly Clarkson, Wanda Sykes, Ice-T, Janae Monáe. It goes on and on. Like, it was insane, y'all. Check it out. It's streaming on Netflix right now. Also creator-producer of Bossy Bear on Nick Jr., which is hilarious. I got to watch one clip today. I couldn't dive too deep into it, but wow, I think I'm going to be in a hole soon. So building out incredible worlds with us today is David Horvath. How are you today, sir? Bottom left mute button.
Oh, yeah.
You're all good. No. And by the way, so everybody knows, David's on 2 devices. We do a lot on this show, and we ask a lot from our guests. Sorry.
Yeah, very happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited. Yeah, this is awesome. The setup you have here is great. Now I got to start paying for YouTube Premium now. This is wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Hell yeah, it's not a lot. You are looking amazing. Let me give detailed descriptions. If you're in a car, if you're under a car working hard, right, and you're only listening, David is joining us live from, I believe, Texas, right?
Yes, that's right.
From Texas, and in his studio in the background, he has everything that he normally talks about on Twitter Spaces, but it's literally behind him. He talks the walk, he talks the talk and walks the walk. He's got incredible Bossy Bear IP, actual toys in the background, Star Wars, Snoopy, Hello Kitty, Sanrio. Oh my gosh, there's so much to cover here, David. But David, before we jump into all that, I want to get to know more about who is David Horvath. How far do you want to go back here before we get into all of your IP extravaganza?
Of course. We can go all the way back to 1997, where I met my wife, Sunmin Kim, at the Parsons School of Design in New York City. And first day of class, I quickly went over and sat next to her, first day of school. And we had our big pads of paper, and there was a nude model and some fruit or some other, like it was like an illustration class. And we had to draw like a live model. So I don't know how to draw. I've never known how to draw, right? My wife can she's doing like a photorealistic, beautiful rendering of this person. And I just did the same pose that I saw, but it was just one of my little creatures that you've seen in our books or, in our minted artwork, etc. So I've got my ridiculous looking monster thing. And the teacher comes over and looks at mine and says, "Oh, of course," to my wife, "Oh, this beautiful, perfect. Keep going. Yes, good lighting." She sees mine. She goes, "Oh, what is that? That thing's ugly, hideous." So I said, what is ugly? Ugly is the only real beauty. We shouldn't be changing and conforming the things that we don't like about ourselves inside and out. We should be shouting these twists and turns about us from the rooftops. This is something to be celebrated, not hidden. Beauty is just an advertising term. So she walks away like, "Oh, right here goes my first F minus." But then my Sun Min, my future wife and co-collaborator, leaned over and said, "I really like what you said about the ugly thing. That's interesting, right?" And I didn't even remember what I said. I was like, I'll just BSing her. I don't know, because this is the only way I'm going to be drawing for the next 4 years. So I had to get through it somehow. But she's like, "No, I really like that idea of how there is no such thing as ugly. That it's sort of like an anti-conformity thing, and we started at that moment to build the universe that we've executed through toys and through consumer products and lots of books, a couple TV shows and a movie, and even a video game." So that was the very beginning.
That is just incredible and just so touching, by the way. I wouldn't be half of the creator I am or who I am without my other half, who is JPEG J. And that's insane that, you guys met that way and in the same field. Jay and I have a long story there. Well, I'll have to share it with you sometime when we
Yeah, we'd love to hear
meet
it.
your wife. And I'm glad that you brought that up because, sometimes I always let the other person bring up their other half because you never know. Sometimes things get rocky, right? How
Sure.
important is it to have somebody, maybe not just necessarily as like your coworker and co-creator, but just like having a partner that like supports you and believes in what you're doing and is like, "David, these like weird things are gonna make you a living, it's gonna put a roof over your head, you're crazy."
Well, yeah, I mean, that you've just asked a really important question. Like, like just recently, we're starting an entirely new character brand, and we're going to do it through children's books this time, right? Like usually we start through some sort of toy that we put in a funky shop in Korea somewhere, but this time we're really going just for a book. And I think I've got it all figured out, right? And then I'm reading it to her, and she's like picking, no, but not just no, like the way I do most things, but like no, like and then I knew right away what she was talking about, just because we've been so mind melding for these last couple decades, and that helped me look at things in an entirely different way, and et cetera. It's the creative bouncing back and forth, but that belief 20 years ago, when there was a time when she had to go back to Korea. Her student visa expired, and it was right after 9/11. Her mom kind of freaked out and wanted the kids home, right? And I had a couple dollars to my name, and I somehow had to figure out how to, if I couldn't figure out this plan that we've had this whole time, like the things what we're doing now, we had written the whole thing down on paper, but I realized if I was not able to execute on what I've been saying I was going to do my whole life, I was literally not going to see her ever again. So that was kind of like the only way that we would be together, is if we figured this out. So that was a major motivating factor, and she completely believed in the process, and I think her belief in it, amplified my own, and knock on wood, so far so good.
Yes, knock on wood and put a ring on it if somebody out there you're with is inspiring you and pushing you up for it. Just to give some people some details, I see we got a request. Just give me a few more minutes with our guests, and then we'll bring you up here for the open mic Q&A. But you can stay in the request. That's fine. That's exciting. I'm so glad people are eager up here to jump up and talk to you. Me and Jay literally just talked about this, David. She finished this piece we just talked about, and she's like, "Hey, what do you think of this price? Is this fair?" And then she like even had, and I'm like, "Of course it's fair. I wish people could see the back end here. She's been working on it for 72 hours straight." And she's like, "Wait, shouldn't I account for inflation too?" Like these are the things that go through artists' minds, right? Like, what is the difference between that and like, getting these dividends, by the way, and making sure you're on time? By the way, David is so professional, y'all. He was here and we were all wrapped up in the pre-back show. 15 minutes to spare. He says, "I'm setting my alarm 2 minutes before the show." And that's how you get these bigger jobs, in my opinion. If you're 5 minutes early, you're on time. I'm going to give it back to you, David.
Yeah, that's how I set the alarm, just because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do a darn thing. That the iPhone alarm and the Siri reminders and all that is half of my brain now. Yeah, but it definitely works. Set alarms for literally everything. You can name all of your alarms. It's wonderful. I got emojis for every problem that could ever arise.
So you're saying technology has actually helped you along the way. It hasn't hindered you. So
Yeah,
has there
yeah,
been, so
absolutely.
like with Web3 and like crypto and all that, like was there a time when you're like, "No, I'm not getting into this"? Like, no, or like was there finally a time when you're like, "I'm going to jump into this space"? And then like you've been quoted as saying like over and over again, you love it here with these DJs.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a friend of mine who runs Sanrio in the U.S. office. We were working on something else, and he sent over some link to what was Nifty Gateway, but I had never heard of it before. And he said, "Hey, you know how you always wanted to make like your original artwork available the same way your wife does with canvases, right? You always wanted to sell an original, but I'm a digital artist, like so. We've been invited to gallery shows from Benetton in Hong Kong or just Giant Robot in Los Angeles, and I could never really hang anything on the wall that was like my original work that you could own and take with you. So I always had to make a print, and maybe I would, make a doodle next to it that you could have something tangible, but I just could never do that. And my friend Craig's like, now you can sell an original digital work of art to someone, and anyone who would be willing or want to collect such a thing, they can actually hold, they can buy that from you and hold it. And I thought, no, that's not true, and you're totally messing with me. And what are you talking about? Yeah, that was the same. We all went down the rabbit hole one way or another, right? So that was my introduction to it. And even just that freaks me out so much that it still does. Like I get goosebumps when I think about it, because it's just so. I wish I could pass that what I'm feeling on to everyone as a way to get them to understand. But you know, since then we've seen the last couple of years unfold. That was like March 21. Where are we even right now? So September. So we've seen all, and many have been here way before me. I'm still new at it, I think. So I'm still very excited for the rest of the world to discover whatever the future version of this is going to be.
We both have a background in designer toys and being collectors, right? And we understand that there's secular cycles, right? And I'm not talking about that sickle, right, that comes for those doors that sometimes have those projects on the doors with the blood. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Sorry, I got to be here. I got to be relevant with it, right? You've seen it. The pendulum swings both ways. I've seen it where just recently now, some toys that I got for a very high dollar a few years ago are not selling for as much. And I'm thankful. I'm like, well, I'm glad I took my profits when I did. I've spent it all here in Web3. I cried a lot after that. Maybe I should have bought a car. Fuck. But you know what? I get to talk to people like you, David. Like I'm getting this opportunity now here to talk to you. Do you still think this is a level playing field for people like me and up and comers to like just, pick someone's ear with as much experience as yourself and your wife?
Oh yeah, and you're going to find those who have way more experience than we do, but we're just one of the many creators, in this, like the the character world, like the character world that's functioning properly is mostly populated by the little guy. Like there's a lot of outliers like SpongeBob in the story-driven side, or Hello Kitty on the lifestyle brand side, or in the toy world, like Pete Fowler and Michael Lau and whoever the current heroes are, right? There's these blue chips at the very top, and then there are thousands of really successful operators who I'm sure would be willing, if you wanted to ever try to pick their brain. Becoming familiar with them is an incredible rabbit hole to go down, I'd say. The designer toy thing is funny because I remember we didn't know to call it a bear market, but there's always been stages where we thought it was over, and then we realized later that it had just barely started. I mean, if you look at what happened, say, in like the early 2000s in Bounty Hunter, and then the 360 Toy Group, and suddenly there's Kid Robot and Giant Robot in LA. Every stage, and it kind of is a mirror to Web3, really. And then Pop Mart is only a few years old. When you think about the whole decades-long span of that movement, and Funko picked up the ball and ran with it, and look what they've been able to accomplish. So that literally came from the designer toy movement and then crossed over into licensing. So I think Web3 is going to unfold, in a similar way as so many of these, movements through culture do.
Oh my gosh, I'm geeking over here, y'all, because you dropped Bounty Hunter, and I'm thinking about Secret Base. And for everybody who's in Web3 right now, that's like literally like saying like MetaMask and like
Oh yeah.
Ledger. And like these people like had to like figure out how to make soft vinyl toys, which was sofubi in Japanese, which was a word coined in Japan. And it's like its whole old lore over there. So I can totally understand why like guys like us, right, David, we came over here like, fuck, I love this thing, the traits
Oh
and
yeah.
all. One thing I want to point out in David's background is a Snoopy, right? And I want to tell everybody, Jay and I had this incredible gallery down in Dumbo, New York. We had it filled out with so much wild stuff. It was so unique, so different. And this group of people walked in, like 25 people, and everybody wanted to know how much this black Snoopy was in the back that I believe was a free gift at Uniqlo. And
Amazing.
that's where I want to go into the power of IP, David, and how
Oh yeah.
that recognition, how powerful that is. You know what I mean? Like they were
Okay.
surrounded by thousands of items that were unique, and they just wanted that Snoopy.
Oh, absolutely. I think I know that Snoopy. Even if it was all black, was it a cause Snoopy by any chance with the X eyes on it? Could have
Yeah.
been.
Yes.
But this Snoopy behind me, for those who can't see, is the Starbucks Snoopy Japan collaboration they did about a year ago. And I have it up here, behind me. Just I've been talking about it with. Usually, my background changes according to who I'm meeting for like the next several for the next several days, and I'll have some sort of like reference I can pull from. But the Snoopy Starbucks collaboration and all the hundreds of movements that that brand has done, especially since the Sony acquisition in 2018, were part of this incredible resurgence to sort of rescue it from what happened. There it is, right after the movie, and I think it was 2015 or so. They had a short term rough time, afterwards. And you talk about the markets going up and down. I mean, the character market in general is headed towards the bottom of the next sort of down cycle. There's like a 20-year cycle, it seems, where the character market sort of pulls back, and we didn't know 20 years ago to call it the bear market, but that's when Ugly Doll came up, and all of that designer toy stuff came up from the very bottom of the previous character cycle. And now we're looking at the exact same thing, and we're seeing things unfold, especially on the ground in Japan and Korea, that we saw on the ground 20 years ago, that are like a mirror image of what happened. So it just makes me excited, because when you reach that bottom, that's when you get these movements in culture like Takashi Murakami and KAWS and Uniqlo becoming what they actually are now. All those things sort of start again, and a lot of new stuff is gonna, like in 20 years, you'll be able to trace it back to these moments over the last couple of years.
I get goosebumps. Goosebumps. Yo, when you started in the convention circuit and just started, doing these shows at brick and mortar shops, right? Did you ever think that you would have a movie at the end of the day, or was that always the vision, always the plan, or did things just line up right?
Right when we started, and here's the thing, this happens, so few people actually take the step forward to put their own intellectual property out into the world at all. It's something a lot of people talk about, but surprisingly, there's not that many making that first attempt as you'd think. And your chances of starting from zero with nothing are pretty high. Then it just depends on how, like, your willpower and the market response when we started, within 6 months, we got a call from Linda Saminsky, who was at the time at Cartoon Network, right? And she wanted us to come in and pitch a show to her, based on what she saw from us in Giant Robot Magazine. And we had just gotten into Giant Robot Magazine with our early Ugly Doll stuff based on like a local paper story from Manhattan Beach, California. I can't remember the name of the newspaper even, the Daily Breeze or something. So, it was just like this one little tiny thing that seems insignificant led to another thing that felt a little more, culturally significant. And then the third step was getting a call from her. And you saw the same thing at those very first Artist Alley Comic Cons, where you'd have the Frank Kozik show up and Gary Baseman and Critterbox Toys show up in like 2004 or 5. And you had developers from development executives from Nickelodeon, like Peter Gal at the time was at Nickelodeon. He was walking around those shows, every Comic Con, and a lot of them going to Toy Fair and looking at what the cool kids who have stuff in the windows at Kid Robot were up to, and doing development deals with them. So we've always had a animated show in development since we started, really, since 2003, from Nickelodeon and Disney to Cartoon Network. Our Ugly Doll movie was originally with Illumination from I think we met with them back in like 2007. And we still talk to them to this day. So we've always had some I've shows that were just off of our NFT collections that are over at Imagine Entertainment, Ron Howard's company right now. So that's the kind of like, that's the outlier dream scenario, that you get these sort of development deals, and that's a joy, and you learn so much from them, and constantly working on them. And by default, nothing gets made. And then once in a very rare, like we were quite spoiled when we first started. We got a TV show picked up in Japan, which played on NHK every weekday morning, called Little Boney. It's like that really was for like little preschool kids. And we knocked Pokemon down to like the number 7 position in the ratings. It was insane. And then we did years of development where nothing went through at all. In fact, the next show we would actually get on the air started just last March, and we started developing it with Nickelodeon and Imagine back in 2018. And that was like a flawless process where there was no development hell or delays or any kind of anything. It just, and that's kind of like how long it took, even you like to get an idea of how long it takes when it goes perfectly well, right?
Yes, and sometimes it doesn't always go perfectly well. And I wanted to ask, like, what have been some of the hiccups and, some of the drawbacks of being in the Web3 space and launching projects in the space? You know what I mean? Just certain things you've learned and certain things you can pass on to other OGs like yourself. And, you mentioned Frank Kozik. He always said, hey, no one's going to come to your door with $1 million check. You got to go out there and get it.
But that's true. No, they don't. Well, in Web3, for us, it was really just learning from zero, right? And we never really launched a 10,000 generative collection or anything of that. We never really undertook what many founders are going through now, right? This kind of later dynamic of not just minting something and, hey, it's art, and making a lot of money, and then running, or maybe some do run away, but there's like a tremendous responsibility. It's almost like how when we first started Ugly Doll, and then we had employees, and then we had distributors to keep happy, and you kind of like have a similar dynamic, but you've already shipped, and now there's you see it playing out on Twitter Spaces and on the blockchain, every single day. Whereas the things that we were doing were very much artwork, and we made it clear from the beginning. Like, in fact, I remember saying to our growing base many times, like, okay, there's 30 Bossy Bear NFTs, right? And then there is a show coming up. There it just is. It's been greenlighted, and it will reach the airwaves. I can't think of the short-term connection to like, don't do this for value. Like, we're not, you always think of it as like you're buying artwork from us the way you're buying artwork from us at the Giant Robot Gallery, in Los Angeles on Sawtelle Boulevard. It's kind of like the same. If you look at it that way, then there won't be any disappointment later, right? And even though that was what we made clear, there would be moments where maybe a YouTuber gives us a shout out or something, and we would suddenly get hundreds of people come, because we had a very close-knit community of maybe 50 or a couple hundred collectors at a time. And then I remember there was one YouTuber who put us on because something got into the press about our animated projects. And he's like, this is huge. Don't you know who Ron Howard is? That's Richie Cunningham. This is going to be enormous. And so suddenly our Discord had all these new people. And it just, it made mostly just pain through gas for people. And it wasn't something that we had anticipated or we were ready for. So that was, a mild disruption, but I guess it's okay. We were lucky to have it in many ways.
I appreciate that honest answer, and I appreciate you just taking us down that road because there's a lot to learn in this space and a lot of hiccups, and I know that it's, the blockchain is unforgiving. So I'm
Oh, of
just
course.
going to that. And if anybody's ever listened to you in spaces, you hardly ever bring up your project. You really are just talking about IP. You're trying to help people out there. And one thing I love in the space too, when people are asking you a question, some people will just be like, tell me yes or no, David, tell me yes or no. And you'll just be like, no, like, I don't want to really tell you yes or no. I don't want to necessarily influence you. Why is it you sometimes don't say what you like or what's your favorite?
Oh, well, right. Especially with specific projects, they'll say like, well, what do you think about it? Does this project have the what it takes to get through? Um, my mom always said, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it. And then my lawyer said, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't name brands. But really also, I just don't, I'm just not familiar enough. How could I say that a certain brand doesn't have it? And then I don't know that they have this thing going on where, oh, that would make all the difference. And I just don't know. It's hard to say. I can say with certainty. I look at Cool Cats. I look at what Doodles has done recently, like at Shibuya Parko. That has meaning for me. I understand that, and I also understand where our office is here in the middle of nowhere. Right, we're here because of an old project with Robert Rodriguez. We wanted to be close to him. But my kids ended up loving school here, so we come here when there's school, and then we go back to Korea when there's no school. And I have no reason to be here. But in this area where the cool store is Target and the Barnes and Noble, like Crocs suddenly became big about a year ago here, out of nowhere again, right? So their collaboration with Crocs makes so much sense to me, being in the middle of nowhere where the cool shop is the Totoro shelf at Barnes and Noble, right? But then in Tokyo, where everything is the cool shop, where to the degree where you don't even notice anything anymore. It's like visual and audio overload, right? But there are these shops that serve as sort of like breaths of fresh air away from all that, the stuff that we just block out at this point. And they have identified one of the top 10 places to be. And there's reasons why it's the top 10 place to be. It's not just a cool shop. It activates ripple effects throughout all surrounding territories. And if they follow up with, well, I'm sure what they will. That's they're well on their way. That's to be able to get a start like that with that happening on both ends is wonderful. And Cool Cats at Comic-Con. That's how I remember our first Comic-Con in 2002, right? And I get excited for them in that way, right?
Oh my gosh, I get so excited whenever you just get to see something new. I love to tell the story of JPEG J's Boonicorn plushie that she did this whole elaborate claw machine that she was really alive inside, and she did it out at DesignerCon out at Anaheim. And it was just incredible. I mean, she got a bunch of pictures with celebrities, and she didn't really get a lot of things that people bought because they were there buying hype stuff and expensive stuff, which is cool. But when she went to New York Comic-Con, she sold out. She couldn't have any more of them. And it's something that you recently talked about, how when you sell out, it's kind of a bummer to a degree because you can't share it with more people. And sometimes people necessarily aren't ready when they get sold out. By the way, we're at that halfway point of the show. If you want to request up, ask David some questions, give David some feedback. I'm going to switch the topic shortly to rebranding because that's what everybody's talking about, and we're going to get into that. Yeah,
Great.
Let's go back to that one thing I was just talking about. Thanks, David.
Well, you had a visual up just before in the corner, and for those who can't see, or it's pinned on Twitter Spaces. Yukinori Dihara is one of my favorite artists going back to the late '90s when I first met him in New York City on Grand Street at Zaka. He's been doing these paper clay figures that are like the serve as like his fine art work, and he puts them up at galleries in Tokyo and Taipei and Seoul, and then in a giant robot in Los Angeles, every year for the last 20 years, or at certain spots in New York City. And he has this weird, very like he has his own look, right? And he has slowly but surely, like right now, this weekend in Shinjuku, at the Shinjuku location of Beams, which is just one of the most mind-blowing and influential physical locations as far as, that like we've had t-shirts there in the past, but it's just like a cultural epicenter of influence. It's the best way I can describe it. Others will walk in there and say, "Oh, this is a clothing store," right? But right now he has this setup at Beams for his newest series called Uma, which is called, it's like UMA is like a typical term there, like we have UFO. It means unidentified mysterious animal. And he's got all like his version of Mothman and his version of Chupacabra and, these mythological beasts. But if he sells out, right, this weekend, which I think he will, that's terrible, because having them there for those who come in to experience it for the next several weeks is kind of like the point of being there. So it's wonderful to sell out, something and have a show where that's the goal. But there's something about being at these places, to be a source of discovery, right, is sort of the ultimate goal. It propels everything else.
Yeah, oh my gosh, that artist has been plugging away for years, and to see them just like go into vinyl and then get the recognition that they deserve, I always love to bring up Power Rangers. It took 8 years to sell Power Rangers, so just keep working out there. Neanderthal, I love the way you spell it. How are you today?
Dude, what's up, dude?
What's goody? Do you got a question, flowers, or anything about IP or rebranding that you want to talk about with us and David Horvath?
Absolutely. Are you kidding me, dude? I just wanted to come up to say thanks to David, of course. I'm always asking him on Twitter, just like fucking posting random ass questions, hoping to fuck. Like, man, I sure hope fucking David answers. And like 9 times out of 10, he'll take the time to answer. And I kind of think he'll use those answers to also write on the Substack, because I've seen that. He'll like answer something and he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna run with this one."
That's a real true story. True story. I mean, well, because I'm responding in real time, and the Web3 space has been tremendously inspirational, because they're talking about things from the zero. Like why would you have familiarity with how the intellectual character property space works, right? And why would you know the difference between a SpongeBob, a Hello Kitty, or a Barbie, right? It's just characters, right? So to hear the topics that come up, whether it's in spaces or just questions that people ask, I really want to put this stuff on paper. My Substack is, I'm gonna almost done turning it into a book. I should have the date pretty soon, and I'm doing that just because no one's really put it on paper. Like how do you actually go from zero and nothing, no money, no nothing, to taking on Hello Kitty? And this is something that's really possible, but just there's never been a step-by-step process put on paper once. Like New York Times, Wall Street Journal articles on Hello Kitty are like, oh, she's everywhere. She's on toasters and she's on toilet paper, which she's actually still not really on everywhere ever. She's on very, very select, relatively few things. Like it's not everywhere. No, it's just they never really ever discuss how Hello Kitty got there. They never cover the important decades that helped that brand earn what you see out there, in certain collaborations right now. So that's what I've been obsessed with, just putting that down on paper for the next generation, who will then take this information that I have and render it, I said earlier, obsolete. Like just I want the next generation to come flip everything that I know, and that will make the industry far more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I I really do like consider the information that you give. As you mentioned, I mean, I do come from zero. In fact, IP prior to NFTs meant absolutely nothing to me. Truth be told, it wasn't something I considered. It wasn't something in the forefront of my mind. In fact, even when I started buying NFTs originally, I came from art. So to me, it was genuinely from the art aspect of things. It was just like, oh, I'm buying digital art. And it wasn't until, the bull run happens, degenerates are in my ear talking about, dude, do you own the IP? That I was like, what in the absolute fuck are you guys talking about? But from that, and now that we're in, I guess, the bear market, it's quite interesting to have your take, because now I get to see it from someone that's actually done it versus earlier you were in another space. I won't mention much about it besides constantly hearing some of them talk about what can I do with my IP, and then having to think back like, hey man, you could do nothing. You could just hang out, just chill, enjoy the ride, and let the company do their thing. And I think you're trying to portray that without being offensive, but it's quite interesting to get to see these aspects and the things that you've put out for all of us to kind of chew on. And I can definitely say it's been a major help from a personal. I mean, for me, it's been massive, and for anyone that I've showed you to, I can tell you, for them, it's also been great as well.
I appreciate that. This is definitely a new dynamic where, for the first time, you know, the way brands thrive and survive is by saying no to almost everything, so that they can make the correct yes, right? That all brands are tremendously fragile. So this is the first time from my realm that we've ever seen control of intellectual property being given to. That's like if I made a Sofubi toy run of 10,000 pieces at our factory in Tokyo, but then everyone who owns one of them can then take that and sort of do whatever they want with that, right? It's very tricky because where I come from, you want to be so very careful with where and how your brand appears and where it is discovered, especially. It's so very important at all stages. It's important for Star Wars. Like Star Wars is always fragile, right? And if it appears in the wrong place too many times, it puts itself at risk. Snoopy was in that position in 2015, not that long ago. And the way they pulled themselves out of it was genius. So now we have this new dynamic where holders can do certain things or almost anything in some cases with their version of whatever they're holding. And so I was saying earlier, like when I said don't do anything, I think what I meant was let the brand owner sort of set the tone, kind of like the way Google did with the Chromebooks back in 2011 when they made that amazing sleek Pixel, right? I know now we have Pixel phones, but they made a Pixel laptop, a Chromebook that before that, all the Chromebooks were coming out kind of wacky and appearing in like really shady retail like Staples or whatever, or Office Depot. And it just didn't, no one thought of it as a brand or thought even of it at all. And so Google came out and said, okay, we're going to set the tone. We're going to make the ultimate expression of, Chromebook. And instantly, everybody was making killer Chromebooks, and they put themselves into being the number one used laptop at universities, right? By sort of allowing that Google to set the tone of the brand. So this is a very new dynamic, honestly, where holders are going to have to sort of reinvent the industry that I originally come from, which is totally fine. I hope it works because that'll just make it that more exciting. You're going to have to create your own, which, by the way, is absolutely true. Look at Pop Mart in China, the way they reinvented what was a really dead, like the blind box minifigures was really like was long in the tooth when they came along, right? But they reintroduced it to an entirely new audience that came nowhere near any of that in that realm. Especially from 20 years ago when the vinyl toy movement started in Japan and North America, like with Gargamel and Secret Base and Bounty Hunter and Frank Kozik and Metacom. And they took the little elements of that realm and they took what Pop Mart was doing, and they created almost an entirely new consumer behavior in one of the largest populations in the world, right? So I think that's what will happen here, or the Web3 version of that.
Now, I do have a question. I guess it would be for those that may not be following you. It might be quite interesting to hear this aspect, but I do have a question for you. I asked it before, but maybe you can give me a little bit more if you don't mind. Now, once upon a time, in a land far, far away, when X was Twitter, so back in the Twitter days, how nuts is that we can say that also? Anyway, you mentioned that. you wanted to build IP or at least try to build something new in public. And I thought, I mean, I recall reading that and I was so excited to hear, like, wait, what? You're going to do this publicly? And I think you had at the time mentioned that possibly doing something in October or at least trying in October. And I'm just quite curious if you were still interested in doing that. And then, yeah, that's really it. I've just been following you, truth be told. As I said, I really do, just to give you the flowers that I think I always do whenever I hop on spaces with you. I genuinely can tell you I appreciate the information you give massively. To me, it's like it's invaluable just because it sets the tone for how I perceive NFTs, and it's given me an opportunity to perceive NFTs in a different light, as opposed to just having all these people who've never dealt with IP just say all their opinions, with most times their opinions so contradictory to what you've said that it leads me to believe that they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Respectfully, I'm just like, brother, there's no way you guys have done anything with IP. Like, there's just no fucking way. Like, it doesn't make sense now that I've read it from good old David Horvath. But so yeah, my question, back to my question. Do you still plan on doing that in October or anytime this year? And are you excited for that as well?
Oh, still extremely excited. We're going to move it from October to second quarter next year, only because we've noticed when we were in Japan and Korea in June and July that the beginning of that 20-year sort of character down market has started. So we want to time it so that, if it's right, if we're right, I'm pretty sure that it's happening again, that we'd be able to sort of enter when it's at the very bottom. And I think I had mentioned just earlier that the very next thing that we're going to do is going to be through the children's publishing space, first and foremost. So we're actually technically just starting the very early inklings of it now. But we'll start doing it live and with weekly updates on our Substack. So that it's one thing for me to say, oh, here's how we've always built everything. Even though we've built something even more recently as Bossy Bear from our show, it's still one thing to say that this is how I've always done it, and it's another to say, here's how we're going to just do it live, right? And then everyone gets to see that these theories and things that we implement actually even work in real time, right? The hard part will be that it does take forever. So it'll be like weekly updates of really super slow, especially in the beginning. Like the Sofubi factories are so backed up now because of COVID and catching up. Like that Nouns Sofubi that we put at the Ginza loft was supposed to happen a year ago. And we were lucky to even get it in there. Like that weekend, it was just a nightmare. So, as things start to ramp up again, absolutely, we're going to be building a character brand from zero, and putting it out into the world the way we put everything else we do out into the world. Now, is it going to be a stinker and we're going to throw it out the window like we do 60% of everything we do? Then yeah, we don't know, right? We don't know how well it will take off, but and we'll show you what it looks like by second quarter next year, and you'll be there for every single step. And hopefully that's interesting. The point is just to be even more helpful, than hopefully what our Substack is able to do now. Just because, like I said, no one's really put this on paper, and why would they? Like McDonald's doesn't put this French fries formula on paper, so I understand. I totally get why Sanrio doesn't want you to really grasp what they did from like late 70s to late 90s so that they could do what they're doing now. And they don't want you to know what they're doing right now, because what they're doing right now is a setup for what happens 5 to 10 years from now, right? They don't want you to know that. I understand. But I do want everyone to know that, because there's a lot of creators out there who are just a person. And maybe they don't want to take on Hello Kitty. They just want to have a table at, Designer Con in Anaheim once a year, and try. They don't want to be the next Mickey Mouse, right? They want to be Kaori Hanata, who made Morris. That's an insane, like there's such a range of what's possible between starting from step one and Mickey Mouse, right? There's no reason to aim for being the next Mickey Mouse when you can't imagine, like these brands that no one's really even heard of, for most people, they mean everything to millions of people around the world. There's so much between where we are right now and the next Disney. So that we kind of want, through creating a new character brand live, we also hope to bring about more awareness as to how this works and who are the other creators who are doing this, and bring out other sources of inspiration forward.
Neanderthal, thank you for your questions, and thank you so much for your input, and thank you so much for your story. I'm going to grab the mic right back, if that's okay with you, just because the sand in that hourglass is dripping down, and we only have so much time. But hey, you said you can post at him, and he'll reply back, and guess what? It's a recorded space, so hold it to him. Hey, guys, as your host up here on Web3 with Boo, I got a little housekeeping to do. Everybody who's joined up, I appreciate you joining up. We got some requests up who want to throw some flowers. If you're coming up here, we love you. Share out the room, like out the room. We got some more questions. We got some more love to give up here for David, who's given us our time all the way from Texas. But before we get to Ash, who's coming up here, I got to give it to my co-host, JPEG J, who has maybe a question or two. JPEG J.
Hi, we have a question from our YouTube audience. What's in store for the Financial Ruin NFT or any of your other NFT projects?
You're muted, David. You're muted.
Yeah, that's a great question. So Financial Ruin, specifically that one, has been at Imagine Entertainment under development for about a little over a year, I think it is now. And it seems to be going well. We've always had an animated show in development, I think I said before, since back in 2002. And, out of all of the ones that we've always had in development, one has become a TV show. And the trick to creating a character brand in general, that I give this advice to everybody, if it looks like that's the route they're headed, that it's one thing to want to get a show made as long as your brand never needs it to be made. That's really important. Unless the goal is literally to make a SpongeBob where you don't even need a brand before that occurs, right? If it's just, I'm into animation, I'm a storyteller, and I want to make a show, then that's the goal, and you should start working on other shows, or work at an animation studio, right? That's a different career path. I'm talking about, if you're creating literally a character brand that lives through toys and handbags and is more like a Hello Kitty, you can always have a show in development. You just want to not need it, so that whether it happens or not, it's just one more thing, in your arsenal, and it's just a part of your path, rather than being something like in the designer toy world early on. So many of the blue chips from the early urban vinyl days got very distracted by all this interest from Disney, especially Disney, and I think some Nickelodeon. But man, some got development deals from Disney that they were our Beeple, and that they were our Yuga Labs. And it suddenly, all of their time and the hours that it took and all that focus got turned towards developing shows, because they thought that getting a development deal means the show's going to get made. It's a wonderful process to go through, and we've learned so much from it, and we love that part of it. But usually it results in no show getting made, and that's just by default. So always keep that in mind. A lot of floor prices jump up whenever there's an announcement, or like someone gets signed with CAA or something. Those are all wonderful things, and that usually have nothing to do with the immediate future at all.
Did you have a follow-up, Jay?
Yes, I did. So, speaking, I think it's really interesting that you said with a character brand that, if you want a show to be made, that's like comes after the creation of the character brand, right? Because I have been looking at your Substack, right? And what you wrote about cute doesn't sell, right? And I have so many thoughts about this because I personally collect a lot of like character stuff. I mean, I like, with like mostly I collect characters that have like a really weird personality, right? So like Gudetama is like some lazy egg, and I absolutely love that aspect of the character. And
Totally.
in your article, you were talking about how you could look like kawaii, you can look like it checks all of the boxes, and yet it doesn't guarantee that it'll do well in the market. So tell us more about this.
Oh, sure. That's very important. Yeah, when I say cute doesn't sell, it's that most cute things just don't sell. We see Kudetama or Miffy, over my shoulder here. I went down to Tokyo Station. Whenever I'm doing research in Japan or Korea, I'll go to like where I think the market is, but I'll go to like to the most touristy areas, like Character Street under Tokyo Station, where it's like a default stop for tourists, and there's a Miffy store, right? And I went there for the, I guess too far to reach over, but there's like a school uniform Miffy that was coming out that day. And it was a long line of, mostly adult women, 100 deep, right? Just waiting in line for this thing. So I got in line. I got one right away, of course. Also just to take pictures of the experience, it was like research and being one with that process. And, but Miffy is very much an outlier, right? If you scroll through most of the Line app or Kakao Talk, you'll find endless volumes of white rabbits and cats and quite adorable things that all conform to the kawaii facial relationship dynamics that don't really do well at all, right? Like there's a picture up here that shows the brilliant Tokidoki brand. And that's a great deep dive. They had tremendous success in Europe, but they've always struggled in Japan and Korea, right? And that you would look at it and say, oh, but it's kawaii and it kind of ticks all the boxes. Why would they have a hard time? And yet the picture next to it shows Little Mai from Moomin. Moomin is like, from the late 40s, early 50s. It started like how Snoopy started as something completely different. And now it's a character brand very much competing, for market share with Hello Kitty and Snoopy. But Little Mai is like this, looks like a terror. I guess you could say it's cute, right? And my wife and many others would say so, but it does not conform to what you would automatically think of when you think of cute things that you believe sell well in the Japanese market or in the Korean market, or if you go to Japan, LA, like in Los Angeles, and shop on there, online or something, right? So you're looking at outliers, like when you go to Target and you go into the children's book section back there by the video games, and you look at the guy who did Captain Underpants and Dogman. He has more real estate at Target than Star Wars does, right? And that's a brilliant series, but it's very much an outlier and not the norm when it comes to what's working, right? So it's a great thing to look towards. It's like, I want to make Star Wars, right? Now, the outcome that Star Wars or SpongeBob had is not usually how it goes in animation, right? But there are so many wonderful animated shows, and it's still a lofty goal to go after being able to explore in any of it. So I just, to those who are starting from zero, who don't even have a design yet, I like to say, like, look at Bridge Shiphouse from Japan. Her character stuff is insane and doing phenomenally well. And she has tribes in the hundreds of thousands who follow her all around the world. But her visual character dynamics don't go anywhere near what you would think of as kawaii, right? So it's most cute stuff doesn't sell. So I think it's more about finding a combination of your voice and what you do with it, and then where and how it's discovered is as important as the visual, and trying to tick off the boxes of adorable. Yeah, the Sanrio stuff is wonderful and quite cute, right? But we often mistakenly backwards engineer from there, right? Instead of looking at a majority of what is actually working, which doesn't resemble that at all.
I cannot hit that 100 emoji even more. Thank you, David, for answering those incredible questions. I think one of those came from a friend of Jay's who works at a store here locally that sells stuff like this. So, hey, she's going to take that information back. Ash, thank you for tuning in. You said you didn't have the time. We kept it recorded, but you had some time. Thank you for the time, Ash, and everybody who's here. We're live on YouTube. Again, I'll say it again. If you got YouTube Premium, you can watch it and listen to us on X on Spaces. You can do both. Come on, you're a DJ, and let's do it. That's me giving you the mic, Ash. How are you?
Yeah, sorry, forgot to unmute. Thanks for hosting, David, man. It's awesome to have him here and learn about how it started. Uh, Dude, I forgot my main question, so I'll just ask the second one. Have you considered writing a book? Because I feel like we're privileged enough to learn this stuff, but maybe some others don't. And either way, I'll still read it because it'd probably be more detailed than the
Oh
threads.
yeah,
And
sure, of course. Yes, the book is it's titled "The Right Small is Huge," and I'll have a date for it and announce the publisher shortly. It is based on the Substack, more on the better written, more recent articles. You know, the first half of Substack from like January until maybe April, I was just dictating into my phone while going on my morning walks at 4 o'clock in the morning, right? So I didn't really put much thought into that. I would just speak into my phone, record it, send that to myself as an email, and then copy paste. You know, so a lot. I was going through a lot of the earlier versions, you know, recently, thinking, oh my God, this sounds like just someone rambling. So the information is all true, and I can understand it, but I'm trying to now go back and edit some of those earlier entries so that they're a little easier to digest. So that will happen shortly. But yes, the book version is actually quite short, and it should be pretty easy to type to digest. We're working on a format and even like the price point, so that it's you know I just want it to be something that everybody can grab, because it really has never been put on paper, and I think it is important to have it on paper so that you can hold, you know, one person's take to what's possible in your hand. There's something that just feels more like, you know, when you're able to hold it. Whenever I show our books to studios, I'll show a stack of books that we've published, and then like the ones that are almost out but are still stapled, and they won't they won't consider the stapled ones as real. They just go, yeah. These are the books. I'm like, well, no, these are the new books coming out. It's the same. There's just something about it. And that, by the way, that's a little alpha for Hollywood. Make books. Make books even if you're not interested in making books, because in Hollywood, for some reason, even if you have zero money and you're not paying for the show to get made, which means they want to own everything, if you have books of your IP, they'll always let you control publishing, 100% of it. I don't know why, but books are like your really they're like a weapon that you will always hold, and then never let go of it. They shouldn't ask; they know better not to. I've never seen them try to, you know, go after publishing. But man, even if you don't have a story, even if it's not for kids, look at Pusheen. Pusheen is that you know, that kind of character brand that's always at Barnes and Noble, right? I think Gund makes the plush, and the books that they have are not kids' books. They're more like miniature coffee table books and humor books, right? You know, and poster books and stationery. But there's something about having your brand in print, whatever form that is, that it gives you leverage, and you'll always hold on to it. Like our Bossy Bear show you know, my PFP is from our Nickelodeon Nick Jr. show. It broke Ryan's Toys Review's previous 2019 record on Nickelodeon for the biggest premiere. But we have no toys right now at anywhere, right? No merch, no pajamas, no t-shirts, none of that stuff, right? And this Christmas, we have a hit show, no toys. No, I don't want there to be, right? By the way, next year, no toys, no t-shirts, no slippers, nothing. But in the spring, there's going to be one single book, the first of many, right? So I don't know how many people will end up actually watching our show, or they know what it is. I guess it's a couple 100,000 kids, millions, who knows? We're all arguing about, you know, different websites report different things, and they have their own system. I'm not even want to talk about it. But whoever it is that's walking into Target and Walmart and your local bookstore, and they've been watching Bossy Bear for the last year, right? If it's by chance their favorite thing or they just like it, that book will be what absorbs all that attention. And to me, that's far more valuable. And you know, even when we're doing things that reach the mass market, we approach it as something that we want to last for years. And the show services the book. It's not the other way around. You know, the show is never the thing. It's just one of the things that we have enjoyed making that supplement the larger story and the larger, you know, goal. And it's very much a belief system. So Especially in this space, there's like a let's fucking go. Every time you hear some big news about, signing a Hollywood agent or there's a show in development, I'm telling you, from someone who has a show that's doing phenomenally well, I don't want there to be any merch. So I think that's a good thing to leave with those to chew on who might have been thinking the opposite, that it's not necessarily the best thing in the world, right? Always have those big things just be one small part of the bigger picture that you're working on.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. I'm excited about the book. You got 2 alphas from my question, Boo. You're welcome. Uh, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, I really appreciate you sharing this stuff. When the first time I heard it, it was really counterintuitive, right? Like, if you want to go mainstream, like, don't go to the mainstream. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? But when you start like reading it, start makes more sense, and I'm not ever gonna develop a IP character, but I'm definitely fascinated to learn more. And that's why I was like joining Web3, because it was exciting to own a fraction of an IP. So it's awesome having you in our space, man.
Yeah. Oh, and there are times when going from zero to like Walmart and Target and Emart and Lotimart or wherever you are in whatever country, from going from nothing to the mass market as your first step is totally great. Like in the toy business, that's what Mattel and Hasbro do all day. Your toy is not this. A toy brand is in no way the same as a character brand or a story-driven character brand at all. It's a completely different business where you have a character that's executed through a toy. Like look at Squishmallows, the plush dolls that are just everywhere now, those big squishy things that from Jazzware is doing phenomenally well. Toys live or die through play pattern and design. So whether it's Barbie or Hot Wheels, and they can be the ones that are huge hits can become brands. They kind of operate like a brand. You can license T-shirts and you get back to school backpacks, and you can have animated shows like um, Monster High, right, was a toy line from Mattel. It's like a doll line, based on like Barbie meets Frankenstein and Dracula sort of thing. And they had backpacks, and they even had an animated show, right? And that all lives on until the moment the play pattern falls out of favor with kids. The moment the play pattern dies, your brand is gone. And you can always attempt to bring it back for the next generation, like MGA did with Lala Loopsy. Lala Loopsy was a huge hit in 2010 with MGA, the company that did Bratz. And they made millions, and they had an animated series on YouTube, and they had endless licensing. So it was like, toy brands can become what we call brand adjacent. They can get Netflix shows, they can have multi-million-dollar licensing programs, but all of a sudden, at retail, the play pattern of Lala Loopsy wore out. And overnight, the entire thing was done. That's very different from growing a lifestyle character brand like Hello Kitty, where you're doing the opposite of that. You're not advertising it, you're not broadcasting outwards, you're being found in places as a source of discovery. You're literally trying to get a portion of the world to fall in love with what you're doing. It's almost exactly like the movie Inception, where it's their idea, and because it's their idea, and they're finding you in places that are meaningful to them already, that they can't wait to go tell just absolutely everybody. And if you hit it right, and if you do, make sure that you're discovered in physical places and online places, or in association with their heroes, places, people, things that mean something deeply to people, which those things are everywhere. And if you do that repeatedly in like what we call little like culture microtransactions over a sustained period of time, your tribes, not your customers, not your fans, your tribe members will tell everybody, and with a passion that you can't buy. You can market to people and you can make hundreds of millions of dollars, but the subconscious knows when it's being sold to. So the lifestyle character brand business is very different from the toy business. It's the polar opposite, actually, even though they both have funny cartoon characters that, dance and look and sing the same. But it's a completely, even the customer's different. The customer for Snoopy and Hello Kitty, and increasingly so Pokemon, is women in their mid-20s to late 50s. For toys, it's increasingly younger, where now it's down to 6. right? And then they jump into like a collector mode, and that whole dynamic plays out. I think on one of my recent Substacks that's up there for free, there's a link to explaining play patterns. It's a fascinating rabbit hole.
Thank you so much, Ash, for coming up here asking all those incredible questions to give that alpha. I'll have to clip it out. I got to get those audiograms out there. I see Golden in the audience. I need to start getting on that, right? It's bearish out there. I just need to do whatever I need to do, you know, to keep pushing those things out there. I appreciate everybody who's coming in here. We're going to go a little over. David said that I could. That was cool with him, right? We'll go like, till 7:15 East Coast time. One thing I want to share here, we got somebody come up here. One thing I want to share, those Web3 exposed me to David, okay? Yeah, I come from the toy market, the toy area, but I got exposed through David Horvath through Web3. I reached out to him. Guess what? I'm watching Bossy Bear. Bossy Bear's talking about cards, trading cards. They're talking about holographic trading cards. I'm like, wait, where can I go buy these trading cards? I'm thinking about Mattel. I'm thinking about how Barbie movie. They're talking about selling stuff. There's a warehouse scene. They're automatically shipping it. This is somebody you guys need to go follow, lift up, be in his DMs, be on his timeline every day. Anytime he shares a post, anytime he shares a thread, fucking blast it out, like it. There's a lot of stuff that goes viral in this space that, is like, questionable. Let's keep David going viral. I thought he was going to drop a movie today or something, because he's not just one space, two spaces. Then he's dropping this viral thread that's going crazy. Hefner, you came up second, so I got to give it over to Mag Dylan. How are y'all today?
Hey, Boo. Hey, David. Thanks so much for having me up. David, I listened into your earlier space and listening now, and it's just been so valuable to me, and I appreciate everything that you've been sharing. So I've been using my IP for a little over a year now to illustrate and build a story brand. So I have 3 characters. My main character's name is Reverie. She's an artist and a designer who's created physicals IRL in real life. So I'm just very interested in everything that you have to say and what I'm building. But I had a sort of a 2-part question for you. I was curious if you had the chance to do something over again in your career experience, if there's something that you would choose not to put your time into. That was part 1. And then part 2, on the flip side of that, what's been the most rewarding for you as a career character builder and everything that you've accomplished so far?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're always coming up with stuff that simply doesn't work all the time. And so we've gotten really good at being able to identify what works, how would we know that it's working? And then we sort of use that as the metric, because everything is so truly difficult and can take decades. So if we bring something to we're known for Ugly Doll and for Bossy Bear, and these 2 brands are selling millions of physical items in every category. From everyone thinks that Ugly Doll is plush dolls, but we're selling mostly millions of bags and zipper wallets and lifestyle, like things that look like an Ugly Doll plush but are actually like holding your Suica card for the train in Japan, or whatever it is, right? Those are the things that kind of keep the engine going. But even from the very beginning, when the plush was available, from day one, if we'd drop off 10 of them somewhere, those 10 would be, drop them off on a Friday. On the end of Sunday, they'd be gone or mostly gone, right? And so you could physically watch things that are working. And that's why we're so quick to bring that first little thing to the marketplace, or to kind of launch a character brand through usually using our factory in Japan, because we can make 100 of something, right? And it wasn't like 20 years ago when we were almost literally one of the only, I think Frank Kozik and I were the only non-Japanese born people being able to make things in these kind of like hollowed ground sacred factory locations. Now it's very much opened up, right? But to be able to create toys in-house, or through plush, or through plastic, or through maybe some short-run paper products, and insert them into these stores and see if they resonate. Because you can know where to put everything, and you can know the greatest place to place something. Doesn't mean that it's going to work. It's just, it gives you the opportunity to make a connection. So if we can see, and we'll know right away, this is not connecting. and then we just simply cut it and walk from it. So I think we've developed the ability to let things go, right? And then whatever is working, we go all in on that, and we plug it into a system that, you know, for us will be just decades. And we're not looking for a one thing that's going to like put us on, or, you know, we're not trying to arrive, you know. Now, those initial consumer products, you do need your core product that keeps the lights on, right? So the funny thing is you can sell millions of things and not be on anyone's radar, like as far as the mass market goes. There's so much to do between, you know, ground like zero, where you haven't done a thing, and being at Target, right? And Target is a wonderful tool for, if 20% of their customer is in love with what you're doing, that's phenomenal. It's a wonderful place because there's one buyer for each, you know, location. You only have to deal with maybe 20 people, instead of where in our business every single location has its own buyer, right? Every museum store, every independent retailer, right, has a person behind it, and you have to call those people, and there are only so many hours in the day. So it's, that part is a true challenge, but yeah, just to know when it's not working, because it just takes so much time. And then as far as things, you know, or things I wish I did differently, not really. Like we had the third worst performing animated movie of all time. Like that's a record. But the great thing about that is that means no one saw it. So they don't know, most people don't even know there was one, right? I mean, they opened like the weekend after Endgame and the week before Pikachu, right back in 2019 or whatever it was. And we knew early on, like Robert Rodriguez and I were both like, oh, and we could see the decisions that were coming down. You know, like there's an announcement, actually, if you look for it on the internet, like when Alibaba signed on and they injected all this money. And I immediately thought, okay, I have to get the Bossy Bear show made immediately. Like the next week, I had an appointment to meet Ron Howard's, like the whole team in Imagine, to try to get a Bossy Bear show made, because I knew that, oh, this was not going to go well, at least creatively. I was no longer working on it and no longer wanted to work on it, right? No longer resonating with it. So, but then a lot of good came from it also, like the Hasbro toy line came from it. And because it had to be developed so early, it was based on, like the geniuses at Hasbro just grew up with our stuff, right? That's the wonderful thing about taking 20 years to grow something, is that then you have a 20-year past and you can be from people's childhood. That's something that a lot of people in the Web3 space are not, like no one's thinking about. That's a very powerful dynamic that you're going to miss if you're just going to go 100% all in and hit the big time in 3 years, is that you can't understand how of a powerful tool that is, right? And we're just now entering that component now. But we'd had that written down since 1997, that it was really important. It's an important step. And it's like the third step of 10, right? So to be important, to be an important memory for people is and to give them one where that would actually mean, you know, that actually even comes up when they're older. These are all really, really important components to think about as you're growing through the IP space. And when I watch Web3, I do believe the IP arena is going to only become increasingly more important to it.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for your time, and thanks for having me up on stage. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to following along the rest of your journey, and hopefully see some more stuff and read on your Substack too.
Thank you. I'm very curious and excited to watch the journey of everybody else here, because I think that this space is going to flip our industry, you know, the way the designer toy movement ended up doing very much a lot of that and creating completely new pathways. So I am excited to see what happens out here through all of you guys.
I couldn't agree more, and I'm so happy to connect with incredible people like her. I just gave you a follow. We always should follow each other. Yo, follow for follow. Let's connect with each other. I actually like having a lot of one-on-one calls. maybe I'm a nut. I have like 15 a week. Yeah. And it's actually a lot more enjoyable than just listening to somebody monologue for 40 minutes. But I can monologue for 40 minutes too. And I just want to, before I let Hef come off the mic real quick, Hef is doing an awesome show Tuesdays, I believe, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, with the co-host that did the intro to our show over here, the intro music over here. It was an incredible show this week. Go back, listen to it. And with that, Hef, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm great, dude. That's awesome. Thank you so much for plugging our show. That's all love, 100% family right there. Totally appreciate it. Totally appreciating the show too. I'm new to David and what he's doing, but love the toys. I'm such a nerd like that too. Collecting toys since I'm a kid, and sneakers and records and artwork and all kinds of good stuff. So I'm not sure if this question that I'm going to ask, kind of a two-part question, but I'm not sure if it was asked in any sort of variation, but I'm going to ask it in my way. It's pretty simple. Just wanted to know, how many toy ideas did you go through before something actually popped off? And how did you deal with the discouragement, if there was any, as you were, going through that process?
Sure, of course. I mean, the discouragement came in a few forms. You know, even though we make like in-house, we produce what ultimately become millions of toys out there. We're in no way a toy company, and we're not even toy designers. So, we have many friends at Mattel and Hasbro, or at Bandai and Takara Tomy, and we'll go to them for expertise when it comes to the actual toy realm. And we did get wrapped up into the designer toy movement. We had Dunnies with Kid Robot, and our own Bear Brick series over and over again through Medicom. And that's phenomenal. But that to us has always served as component of the lifestyle character space, right? Like half of Sanrio's revenues come from plush dolls, yet they are not a toy company and they're not in the toy business, right? So for us, toys are an important connection component so that you can hold the brand in your hand. Like that's really important. And that's why Sanrio puts so much focus on plush and does so much of it in-house, and then he's really picky when you have the license. It's that because it's such an important emotional connector point. Even though primarily, I mean, kids have Hello Kitty, of course, but it's primarily adults, right? It's a very specific audience that drives the multi-billion-dollar character industry. And this is increasingly true for Pokemon. And it's funny because they want that. They're all trying to sort of graduate from their birth arena. Like Mario desperately Nintendo wants to like just leave the dynamics of the console market, right? Can you imagine you have a brilliant IP like Mario and Zelda, but then your console doesn't sell? You're 8 years in down for no reason other than just the mechanical thing didn't resonate. It's a shame, right? So the Mario movie from Illumination was a major attempt to sort of break away from the gravity of that very narrow dynamic. And you see that happening with Pokemon. If you really look under the carpet, there's certain websites that are from the Pokemon company where it kind of reveals itself more. But that card game, like even as like in the last year, I think the beginning of the year, the card game revenues were like 4% of their entire thing, and the video games are like another 4%. And I think that's even come down dramatically more. That's going to be cut in half by this time next year. And so what is Pokemon, right? Is it a gaming brand? It was. It came from there. The same way Snoopy came from, newspaper comics and Christmas specials from the 60s, right? But it is no longer that. You can still watch those. And there are kids who have Snoopy stuff, sure, but they have entered an entirely, new space where when I think of Pokemon, I mean, I think of ceramic dishes and jewelry and the things that they actually make the most of. That's Pokemon. I don't know. I mean, of course there's cards. I get back to the US and I go to Target and, oh yeah, there's plenty of cards. And you go into the Family Mart or 7-Eleven by the register in Japan, and they have the card game there. But that's not really Pokemon to me, not now. So it's very interesting that this market, there's a world that many people in this space have yet to experience. That if you go, oh, you know what? Google Pokemon Center and then double space and just type .jp, and that'll search. You'll get to the search result that'll get you to the actual, Pokemon website. And there's a lot of plush, but it's a lot of plush for the reason I can put it in the chat. There's a lot of there. Oh, no, I see. I'm in Chrome. There are.
David,
Let
you don't
me
have to be working.
let
David, as a guest, is doing incredible right now.
There we go.
He's
yeah,
trying to
I
get
see
the
him.
website in the background
Yeah,
of
over here.
YouTube Live. So if you're watching YouTube
Over
Live,
here.
you can see it.
Yeah,
I love
Yeah,
this.
I
This
sent
guy's
you a link and you
professional.
might be able to open it on the screen. So,
that's
but even when you look at it, right? Oh, but it's a bunch of cards and it's what are you talking about, Dave? It's a bunch of plush dolls, right? But then you really start doing a deep dive into what the actual offerings are, and you go through their sales figures and you look at what makes up a majority of the revenues, and it's it's not what we would automatically by default think of when we think of Pokemon consumer products. It's very interesting. So that is a great rabbit hole to go down. Like, what are these brands actually doing? Like, who are the actual customers? And that will help inform perhaps what you can do with things that started for you as just a collection that you made on the blockchain. And you thought, oh, well, should I make shoes? Should I make this? The answer is yes, to all of it. But how and where are those things going to be found, right? And how often? And how many of those things should you do, right? And why? It sounds silly, but it's such an important part of that whole business.
Thank you, man. I greatly appreciate you taking the time to answer the question. I have one more question too, since you're talking about Pokemon. I am more of a sports card type of guy. I never really got into Pokemon, maybe because of my age, and maybe the people I was hanging out with at the time. But I always respected the game for Pokemon and Magic the game and people that were into that stuff. But how, like, and for me, like with all this here, I think one main reason why I didn't really get too much into it is because there's so much of it. I didn't know where to start. Like when you go to Target or any of those stores, when you see at the register, like you're saying, the Pokemon cards, there's just so many different Pokemon cards. I'm like looking at it, and it's no offense to anybody, but it's Chinese to me. I can't understand it, So
Sure, of course.
yeah,
I
how
mean,
do you,
like Pokemon cards are like 4% of Pokemon as far as revenues go, but
I
90%
had
of
no
that is
idea.
in the US, right? So I think that, oh, well, this, I mean, easy for me to say, but look at the yen versus the dollar. Like, it's much cheaper to actually just sit around and do nothing in Japan than it is here, where we are in Texas, even where we are. So if you can somehow figure out the flight, like I know some cheap places to stay. Everyone goes to Shinjuku, big mistake. I recommend if this is the world that you're interested in living in for the next several years, right? And I do think that IP in many forms is going to be a major driver and a big component of the future of Web3. And it doesn't mean you have to make things in real life, but having a grasp of what is actually happening out there. And Japan being the white space that it is when it comes to being able to start from zero. I go to the ATM at 7-Eleven in Japan and I take out $1,000 and it removes $600 from my account. Like, you can't you can't lose. Now I don't know how long that's going to last. So right now is the best time to just go there. Don't stay in Shibuya. Don't stay in the big touristy areas. Go take a train and pick a direction and just go for an hour. Get off the train, and that's what is really happening there. And like, investigate. Go to, like, not the hot stores that there are in the travel guides, but like, where do people actually go? Where do the cool kids go? But then where do families shop, right? What's the Aeon Mall, when you go just an hour and a half south, right? Because that's what's really happening there. And then look at Pokemon, and what is Pokemon doing at the Aeon Mall? The Aeon Mall has hundreds of stores. Oh, there's a store, Village Vanguard. That's like our hot topic, right? So what is Pokemon doing there, right? That's Pokemon. So I highly recommend interfacing with these character brands in the arenas where they're not just thriving, they're using those markets to appeal to other markets and have a ripple effect out to even things that, like, if we want something to happen in New York, we'll usually put something in Taiwan or in South Korea first, and it'll reach New York the way it does through the vibrations literally of culture, right? It's rare that we'll actually just put something in New York City first, unless of course we want to reach some cool kids in Hong Kong, then we'll put it in New York City, and do a few other things. Some of that stuff is trickery, but a lot of it is just focusing on places that are meaningful to people, and it doesn't always have to be stores. You want to collaborate with Nike. I recommend collaborating with a location. One of our toys that we made in the last couple of years was a mascot of a store in the meatpacking district in New York City called Yo-Yo Mart, and Yo-Yo Mart was like the favorite of Hugh Jackman. So we made a toy of a figure of the mascot of that store, right? And so the owner already had a whole section of our stuff, right? Huge, like apparel and toys and tchotchkes. But that made him just more excited, right? That he was like, that was the first thing that he would show people. And sure enough, our store in South Korea, our Ugly Doll store there in Zamjigil, Hugh Jackman walks through, it's in Insadong, which is like the default first place you go to if you visit Korea for the first time, right? And he walks in there and he tweets from the Ugly Doll store, like, I found the Ugly Doll flagship store, because he remembers all that stuff from going to Yo-Yo Mart, in New York City on the corner there. So there are things that you can do, and it's not just with celebrities, but that's the case with everybody, right? Like, if you're doing that to him, you're doing that to everyone who walks through there. That's actually far more important, is that how many people were going to Yo-Yo Mart on that corner, in Lower Manhattan every weekend? Families, older people interested in this stuff, just everybody. And so how many people that year traveled to South Korea or went to the Taipei Toy Festival or went to some other, place where they're also going to find us? And they freak out. And you're creating this kind of like insane experience that then they run home and they tell absolutely everybody, right? And you don't, like, we had a sign at our licensing show booth that we've been using for the last several years that says, like, accomplished with no social media, and we have a big slash through all the Facebook and through all the Instagram, and it's kind of half being funny, and there are clever ways to use social media, but when you're in the lifestyle character business, especially, you are not in the attention economy, right? We say it so many times now, it's going to sound like a cheesy catchphrase, but you're literally in the falling in love industry. And that's very different from getting people, like, chasing awareness. In fact, awareness is probably the worst thing you could chase after when you want everybody to fall in love with your thing.
Thank you so much, Hef, with all those incredible questions. And hey, David literally will answer like 7 questions when he answers, because he just wants to be thorough and cover all the bases. Like, he's not just hearing himself talk, in my opinion. Like, he literally, it's like, we need more books. And I have many books in the past in Kickstarter, because not only do you get to support them, they put your name in the back too. And it's like provenance, like, we're creating culture on the chain, right? Like, that's why I like it. It's not to show off. It's to say, hey, look, I really did support them. No, look, here's my name. And just like today, I saw someone screenshotting that they bought a digital asset from Shaquille O'Neal. And they're like, hey, look, I bought this from Shaquille O'Neal. You know what I mean? We've done a lot. We've covered a lot on this show. We've gone over 30 minutes than we normally have. I thank everybody for coming in here today, giving this place a listen, giving David a listen, giving me a listen, giving JPEG J, my incredible producer, in the background doing so much. I just want to shout her out real quick. If you look at the live stream, she's done great with the Ugly Doll Dolls IP and the Bossy Bear IP up in the Rug Radio clouds. She's put them in the Rug Radio clouds, everybody. In the background, there's all of the IP in the background, like all of this stuff. I think if you've watched this the whole time for 90 minutes, you will literally recognize these going forward. You'll be like I think now the algorithm might be brutal to you, and you might see the Ugly Dolls movie on your Netflix the moment you log into
Sorry about that.
because it'll do that because it's listening to you. David, before I do shut us down here, I do have a little outro here. Do you mind giving us the second to last word? Anything that you're currently, working on? I appreciate the alpha of all that you are working on and building in public. But yeah, anything last words there, if you don't mind?
Well, you want me to give you the second to the last word of something that we're working on?
No, I want you to give the second to the last word before I give the last word of this show. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I thought you guys have heard enough of me. I'm also fantastically great at making people just fall asleep. I'm going to put out a tape.
No, I just want to make sure we covered everything. If there's anything we didn't
Oh, no,
cover, if there are
absolutely. This has
questions
been
you want to be
wonderful.
asked in the future, seriously, if there's somebody out there that does the spaces and you guys need a guest, get David on the show and like get him up there and like, bounce questions off him. You know what I'm saying? He'll let you know where the quicksand is.
Yeah, there's plenty of quicksand, but sometimes, there's a little nugget of gold at the bottom of those sand pits. So don't worry about it. It's all part of the process. Yeah, thank you for having me on. You guys are amazing. JPEG J, way better than Joe Rogan's Jamie when it comes to like, I had the graphics popping up as I was still talking about it. So I don't know how you got it up there on the visual that fast, but absolutely amazing. So thank you really, and everybody in the room for just giving me your ear. I hope it's helpful, even to those who are listening to the recording. My greatest wish is for all of the stuff that I'm saying to be rendered completely obsolete as soon as possible, because it's going to make my industry just that much more interesting, and it's going to help move Web3 take over a major part of where I've come from for the last 20 years. I really want Web3 to grow into what I know it can be. So anything that helps push that forward, I'm all for it.
Hell yes. Thank you, David Horvath. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This has been episode 47 of Web3 with Boo with my incredible co-host, JPEG J. Shout out Rug Radio, keeping us alive and hyped up there on the timeline, man. Woof. Man, everybody's looking like they're having a party all the time. I wish I was in Seoul, Korea. Maybe I'll get out there next year. Korea's on the list. It's on the list. Shout out Artifact Creators, guys. People talk about rebranding. I don't know. I pop out my fucking PFP out there. Everybody knows exactly who I am, what I'm doing, what I'm about, and what this voice is about. And if you've met me IRL, you know it all matches up, baby. So with that, that's episode 47. What else I got? I got a lot more here. I'm sorry. This show is packed. You're like, oh my God, he's continuing to go. Yeah. We're on Cyber, on LinkedIn next Tuesday. I've been co-hosting with Kevin on Earth. Yo, it's great out here. We're still building it. This shit is not dead. We're building Glitchart IRL at Station 3, September 27th, 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. There'll be cocktails, but there'll be non-alcoholic cocktails, fruit cocktails. Listen, okay, pause. All right, listen with that. I love you guys, and I will see you next week, same day, same time, Thursday, Web3 with Boo, live on Rug Radio. Check y'all out. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. Don't click on links. Walk. Don't run.
In Web3.